So from the committee, we've got myself, we've got Alder Douglas, we have, I believe, Alder Santana. Misty, do you know who we have on the phone? Misty might be setting up text.
It's me. Alder Decker, it's me on the phone.
Gotcha. Okay. So one more makes quorum. I know that we're going to have Alder Furlow and Alder Marchand. I know that Alder Morrison is unable to attend, and we will see about Alder Breckian. Although in a couple more minutes, maybe we'll have to press one of our colleagues into duty. We'll see who we decide to draft. Here comes Alder Marchand. Good evening, Alder Marchand.
Good evening, Chair Decker. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
All right.
Well,
hello, Alder Douglas. Hello, Alder Ferraro Santana.
How are you?
Hello there. Alder Marchand. Much hand.
Let's give my vice chair, the majority leader, another minute or two, but then we can get started and he'll join us when he can, as we will have quorum.
Hello, Alder Santana. Can't hear you. You're muted. There you are.
Give it 60 more seconds, Misty, and then I will get us started. All right. I'm going to go ahead and call us to order and minimize my Zoom screen so that I can read the notice. My computer will allow that to happen. Okay. Board of Alders notice New Haven. The Legislation Committee of the Board of Alders will meet on Tuesday, September the 1st, 2020 at 6:00 p.m. via video conference at https://newhavencT.zoom.us/s/93809993037 and by phone at 646-558-8656, webinar ID 938-0999-3037, to hear and act on the following items. For required password, contact public testimony at newhavenct.gov. Item OR 2020-0017, ordinance amendment of the New Haven Board of Alders to the Code of General Ordinance, mandating training for appointees to the New Haven Board of Police Commissioners. Per order, Honorable Charles Decker, Chair, attests Honorable Michael Smart, City Clerk. These items are on file and available in the office of the City Clerk, room 202 at 200 Orange Street, New Haven, Connecticut 06510. For accessibility related accommodations, please call 203-946-7833 voice or 203-946-8582 TTY TD. Public comment / testimony may also be submitted via email to publictestimony@havenct.gov before 2:00 p.m. on the day of the meeting. If you wish to present testimony at the meeting, you must register in advance at https://newhavenct.zoom.us/s/930, 938-0999-3037, or by calling 203-946-7934 before 2 p.m. on the day of the meeting. Public can view the meeting at https://newhavenct.zoom.us/938-0999-3037 or listen by phone at 646-558-8656, webinar ID 938-0999-3037. For the required password, contact public testimony at newhavenct.gov. Okay, you think I would have memorized that? Welcome, colleagues. Let us get started. I will start by calling the roll based on the order that the committee is listed on the roster. Alder Furlow.
Present.
Welcome. Alder Farrar Santana.
Present.
Alder Douglas.
Presente.
Presente. Alder Morrison.
Present.
I believe so. Alder Marchand
Present.
and Alder Brackeen.
Present.
And I am present as well. Welcome, colleagues. We will hear the item before us in just a moment. First, I would like to recognize our other colleagues not on the legislation committee who have joined us this evening. I see Alder Campton Singh, Alder Gerald Antunes, Alder Abby Roth, and Alder Salvatore DeCola. Welcome, colleagues. Very well. We have one item before us, and I believe that several of the makers of the item are present, but I believe that Alder Antunes will present our item, OR 2020-0017. Is that correct?
Yes, I will.
All right. You may go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members, for allowing me to present this legislation on the required training for police commissioners. The reason that I feel we should require special training for all police commissioners is that there's obviously a need. Just like we felt there was a need for a Citizens Police Academy to educate the public on what the police do, and more recently, training for members of the clergy. Let me ask you this question. How can we expect to change and improve policing in the city if we do not address the needed changes at the top level of police management? We can't fix it from the bottom up. It has to be done from the top down, starting with the leaders and the decision makers. Our police officers, supervisors, managers, and even the chief are required to be properly trained. And why shouldn't we require the same of our police commissioners? Remember, the police commission is made up of regular citizens. Most have no police-related training or policing experience, even at the most basic level of a patrol officer, to use to base their decisions on. Yet we appoint them to manage and oversee a professionally trained, multi-million-dollar agency. Just as a point, did you know that of the 169 cities and towns in Connecticut, there are 75 towns that have an annual budget less than the New Haven Police Department's budget. That's about 45%. Commissioners control the interviewing, the hiring, promotion, discipline, and in some cases, even determination of members of the police department. These are officers who must act on issues that require professionalism and instant decision-making based on training that they receive under state-mandated issues. Why shouldn't we expect at least some reasonable amount of special training for those who we empower to control the policies, the practices, procedures, and even the fate of some of our police professionals? The bottom line is that I feel that it's incumbent upon this legislative body to ensure to the public that the level of management that we put in place to lead has a reasonable amount of training to carry out their charge. Now, just for a minute, let me speak about some goals and objectives that I was looking for in the required training. The training should make certain that all appointees of the Board of Police Commissioners are aware of the Police Commission's bylaws, the state statutes, and the city charter that governs them. The training needs to ensure that commissioners are aware of the organizational structure and the goals and objectives of the police department. They need to understand how and why police officers are trained in the various phases of law enforcement and service to the public. In addition, the training needs to make commissioners more aware of labor relations, the standards, as well as labor unions' goals and objectives as it relates to treatment of our officers. And lastly, the commissioners must understand the need and function of the Civilian Review Board. That's going to be very important. I think these are some of the more immediate training needs, and I expect that somewhere in the future, additional points may be presented. Thank you for your time, and if the committee has any questions, I'll be happy to hear them.
Thank you, Alder Antunes, for the succinct but informative presentation. If colleagues have questions, please indicate so by raising your hand either on your screen or in the panel window, and I will take a cue, and we will start with Alder Ferraro Santana.
Good evening. Thank you, Alder Antunes, and I appreciate the fact that you've addressed this issue. Many times on the Aldermanic Affairs Committee, we have asked that there should be going hand in hand with training that goes along with certain commissions or boards. And unfortunately, that isn't always the case, that we get the training, that the incumbents get the training that is required to do their job. Let's say, I know it's not a job, but they are sitting on a board of commission. Most often, they don't even know what the board of commission does. And that's unfortunate. That information should be given to them ahead of time so that they are aware of how the commissions or boards work. So I appreciate the questions that you're asking. Thank you.
Thank you.
All finished, Alder? Other questions? I see Alder Marchand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first of all, I want to thank my colleague Alder Antunes for his leadership on this issue and for his presentation. I just have a couple of questions for clarity. I'm looking at the bullet point list, the bulleted list of elements that should be included. I note that it says should include but not be limited to the 11 items. And starting at the bottom, emergency communications. I don't quite understand what that means. Does that mean the protocols for emergency communications within the department, or how the PSAP operates? What in your discussions with colleagues, what did that kind of mean?
I thought the wording is a little bit short, but you had it right on the second guess. It was for them to learn and understand how the, I hate that phrase PSAP, but the emergency communications, how that function operates.
Right, right. I would like to have that training too. Okay, so thank you for that answer. I assume interview techniques has to do with judging whether or not applicants are suitable to serve in the police force, or is it more about gathering evidence to determine possible disciplinary actions?
I don't know why you ask these questions. You've answered them yourself. That's exactly it. The main phase of the initial hiring, that it's important in any job when someone's being hired that the body that's interview them has a good general basis of how to do that. And the other part is during those disciplinary hearings, proper ways to interview are important, more important than.
Okay, thank you for that. In regards to the ride-along, could you say more about the ride-along and how you see that as being an important component? And what if you have someone who wishes to serve on this commission who is in a wheelchair? Would the police department be able to accommodate someone with a mobility issue in doing a ride-along?
Well, the reason for the ride along is I think the commissioners, like many people have done ride alongs with the police. It's an opportunity for them to get in the car and see what happens when an officer has to respond to these calls, how they're received when they get to the sites. You know, sitting in the office, you really don't see that. You can't put yourself in that position. So when issues come up where they have to make a judgment or determination on, it would certainly help if they've had at least some exposure there to see what the officer has to go through.
Do you have a particular thought, Alder Antunes, about, you know much more about the police department than I do for sure. How would someone who wishes to serve on the commission with a wheelchair, how would that person be able to do a ride along?
Well, that may be an area where we have to waive that portion, because I don't believe any of the police vehicles can accommodate wheelchairs unless, I mean, they may be able to move from the chair to the vehicle, but it may be more of a liability process there where we wouldn't want to take that on.
Do you feel, Alder Antunes, that there could be a bullet added around confidentiality training? I know that there's other bullets that deal with FOIA, but I just recall when we were writing the ordinance for the Civilian Review Board, actually when we were writing the job description for the coordinator of the Civilian Review Board, we wanted to have a section that talked about training on how to deal with confidential information. I assume that these commissioners get that lecture when they join already, but do you think that would be a good thing to add?
I hope so. And, you know, my thought was in making this broad enough to open the door to it anyway, but my thought would be that in those issues dealing with labor relations, that's where that piece would come in.
Okay. I see. Great. Okay, that's all I have for now. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Alder Antunes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Marchand. Further questions from the committee? Further questions from the committee? I have just one, which is just, I think, a clarifying question as well, which is, oh, actually, I see my vice chair has put his hand up in the panel app, so I'll let him go first. Please go ahead, Alder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, there's not much more to ask. I think everything was covered. But through you, Mr. Chair, I would like to, and good evening, Alder Antunes. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, sir.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if we can get a copy of the current bylaws of the commission, I think that would be helpful.
I think that would be helpful as well. Yes, thank you.
If I
Thank
may,
you.
Mr.
Please
Chair,
go ahead. Go ahead.
To Alder Furlow's point, you may be somewhat disappointed. I researched that, and currently, I believe it's the first 2 or 3 pages of the bylaws are missing, as is a signature page at the end, verifying that it has been incorporated. So you can get a copy, but it's going to be missing many pieces. But I will say this, that they are being rewritten, and I'm sure something will be coming out soon.
Thank you for that further clarification. I will ask just my clarifying question, or more it's a procedural question, I guess. But in our packet for this evening, the legislative staff has recommended that should we move this item favorably, that we amend by substitution just to basically turn the bullet points into the actual red line ordinance language. I just wanted to make sure that you had seen that and were aware of that.
Yes, I got the copy of the redlined outline here, and it's appropriate as far as I can see.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that the makers were aware of that, that it's not a content change, but it will be a procedural necessity if we move this favorably. Any further questions from members of this committee? Seeing none from the committee, I thank you, Alder Antunes. Please stick around because after public testimony, something else may come up. So I will now ask if there are members of the public who wish to be heard on this item. Misty. Misty.
Alder Roth.
Alder Roth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I very much appreciate Alder Antunes raising this and all the points he made. I just had one additional thought for something that perhaps would be useful to include if the committee agrees, and that would be information on MOUs that the police department enters into, both sort of knowing where officers with other towns are able to operate, and then just we had a recent hearing on the MOU with the Yale Police Department, and the Police Commission certainly has a lot of powers there. And so that might just be useful training to include. That was my thought for an additional item, perhaps.
And Alder Roth, as a point of order, we'll need your name and address for the record. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Abigail Roth and 42 Lincoln Street, New Haven.
Anything further?
That's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Alder Roth, for coming down, as it were, and making that suggestion. Other members of the public who wish to be heard on this item? I see Commissioner Ribeiro with a hand up. So please go ahead.
Yes.
Name and address for the record first.
Yes. Good afternoon. Good evening, everyone. My name is Evelise Ribeiro, Police Commissioner for the New Haven Police Department, and my address is 74 Front Street. I'm in New Haven. So first, I want to just thank the board for holding this session, and I want to thank Alder Antunes for presenting this. I did have an opportunity to review the ordinance, as well as I did read the portion of the charter that speaks about the boards and commissions. And as a longstanding member of the Police Commission, I've actually been, I call it my second tour of duty on the boards. I haven't served since 2005. And I've been here with a lot of chiefs, have gone through a lot of different things. And I just wanted to state that I do support this ordinance. And I, like I said, I thank Alder Antunes for bringing it to your attention. I think it's important just being on the board for a long period of time and having a lot of new members coming on board. I think it is important to learn what the commission does and what the police department does. I've been fortunate to have been there for a while and been able to see what's going on. But some of the things that the training that I had years ago, which we don't really offer now, is I went through the Citizens Academy. I was able to do a ride along. I have been involved in one of the things that Alder Antunes has listed, and I think that it is important to have commissioners have that information in the beginning. So in my communication with Alder Antunes, I do have some, additional comments and suggestions that I would like to offer to him and to his committee regarding some things that I think would be helpful as well. So I thank you for your time and for allowing me to speak this evening.
Thank you very much for your testimony, and thank you for your service on the commission as well.
Thank you.
Do members of the committee have any questions for Commissioner Ribeiro? Alder Furlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Commissioner.
Good evening.
This evening. Did I hear you right? Did you say that you had more to offer to this particular amendment?
Yeah, I had some suggestions regarding the training, and I also had some questions regarding some of the things that were proposed.
So through you, were you planning on submitting those tonight or to ask those questions in this committee? Because once it leaves the committee, it'll be going to the floor for a vote. So
I can if that's appropriate. I wasn't sure if that was appropriate. I certainly can.
oh yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
Absolutely.
All right. So one of the things that I did want to, I felt was important to note is that under number A, where it talks about the review of the bylaws and the commission and general orders. I do recall in the past, the commissioners were giving a disc, but now it would be a flash drive, because that was many years ago, in which we were given copies of all the general orders in different things. So this way we will be able to review them, at home or at our leisure. So I think that's something that would be helpful also, in addition to the training that's being proposed. I wanted to see if we could add an ethics training also. I think that's important, particularly around the comment around confidentiality and other things. I know in the past that training had been offered to commissioners. I can't remember exactly who gave the training. It might have been someone from Corporation Counsel, but that had been offered to commissioners in the past. Also an opportunity for Citizens Academy, if that's something that is going to happen again for commissioners. Also a training on the hiring practices. Alder Antunes kind of alluded to it, but it's not specifically highlighted in this. And I think it's important for the commissioners to know the process regarding hiring officers and the background investigations that are done, so that they have a better understanding. I noted that it states that the training would be coordinated by the training officer, is certified by the CAO, but I wanted to know specifically who the trainer would be, or if that hasn't been thought out yet, that's fine. But if the trainer is going to be actually a member of the department, or we're expecting a CAO to train, or different trainers depending on the topic, and whose responsibility is it going to be to ensure that this is completed? Would it be the chair of the commission? Would it be the CAO? I mean, just to kind of flush that out a little bit more. And if it's not appropriate to put those things in the actual ordinance, perhaps some type of procedural or procedural manual or policy manual could be drafted as well. And those are my comments and questions. I'm sorry, I do have one more. It doesn't state here if the training is not completed, because it does state that the training needs to be completed within 6 months, but we need to have some, I think we need to have some type of parameters around that, that if it's not completed within 6 months, and what if there were extenuating circumstances that made it not possible to complete it within 6 months? Would there be opportunity for extension and things like that? I think would be good to put in the ordinance. And thank you, those are my comments.
Thank you very much. And we will take that into consideration and I think probably ask the maker about them after the rest of public testimony. But thank you very much. Are there any other questions before I let Commissioner Ribeiro go? Alder Furlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could we just get that list up through you to staff, just in case she goes, so that we can have, I know some of us are trying to write it. I wasn't able to write everything down that she said, so that we'll be able to reference everything in deliberation.
Misty, were you able to get the list?
I can send, I received, when I registered, I received the email to send questions to Al Lucas. Should I do that or should I send it to someone else? I can send him a quick email if that's the process.
I think that would be best.
Okay, so I'll do that.
Alder Furlow.
Just wondering, is Mr. Lucas in his office tonight? Because if he's not, we won't get the email for
Yep.
this.
I'm here.
Okay, great, great. Can't see anybody, just checking. Thank you.
I'll forward to him shortly. Thank you.
Good to triple check though. Thank you, Alder. Anything further for the Commissioner? Seeing none, I thank you very much.
Thank
And
you.
I will ask, is there anybody else from the public who wishes to be heard on this item? I see no hands, so I'll ask a second time. Anybody else from the public who wishes to be heard on this item? And a third time. Is there anybody else from the public who wishes to be heard on this item? Seeing none, I would like to hear from Alder Antunes once again about his thoughts as the maker of this item on what Commissioner Ribeiro laid out as some possible additions.
Certainly, thank you.
And can I give your name and address for the record once more? Please?
Gerald Antunes, 195 Weybosset Street, New Haven.
Go ahead.
As far as the general orders, that portion, I would kind of think that may be something in the commissioner's bylaws that they would give those out when they come in, but that's up to the committee. But it's just my thought. Training on ethics, I think, is good. That's important. I would be agreeable to something like that. Citizens Academy, I think maybe that would be an option because some of these pieces that we have here are included in the Citizens Academy. I'd leave that one up to the committee. Hiring practices, as far as hiring new personnel, I think that would just be something that would be included again in the labor relations portion of it. And I don't know if I got all your questions down. I was writing fast too. And the portion on who does the training, my initial projection, I talked to the training officer, Lieutenant Maturo, and they would look at using either training officers that are in the department now for some of these topics, other city employees such as labor relations, that type of thing, and the same trainers that would train our police officers. So those are the only ones I wrote down. If there's something other that I missed.
Thank you. The only other one that I jotted down, if I understood it correctly, was is there any particular provision for if the training is not completed in a timely manner?
I didn't put anything like that in, only because I thought that may be something that would have to go on the charter side as far as like appointments and how long you have to before you approve an appointment, that type of thing. So I'm not sure on that side of it.
That makes sense to me. Thank you. I see Alder Ferrara Santana has her hand raised. Please go ahead.
Thank you. In the Aldermanic Affairs Committee, we can't appoint someone for 6 months. If the term, we can only appoint according to the term that they've been given. So if the term is 3 months, 3 years. We can't do a partial. We've tried to do that before, so unless there's something in the charter, and maybe we can think about next time when they update the charter again, that would be something that can be a suggestion. But it's very difficult to put a 3 month, 6 months probationary period in, but I think it's a great idea because sometimes things happen and I think in this case, if a person can't complete their training, then they shouldn't be appointed to the commission. So maybe the training should happen before they get appointed. So that's another question. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Ferraro Santana, and thank you for your wisdom from the committee that's actually going to be approving these appointments. Are there other questions for our colleague Alder Antunes? Seeing none, I will ask one final time if there's anybody from the public who wishes to be heard on this item, and I am scanning for little blue hands in my app here, and I am seeing none, and so I will entertain a motion. Alder Marchand.
Mr. Chair, I move that we close the public hearing portion of this meeting.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
The motion has been made and it has been seconded, and I will call the roll to vote. Alder Furlow.
Yes.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Ferraro Santana. Alder Ferraro Santana is on mute.
Very sorry. What was the question? I apologize.
The question is on the motion which has been made and seconded to close the public portion.
Oh, second. No, just no.
Is that a yes? Okay, I see the yes. Alder Douglas. I seem to have lost Alder Douglas. Alder Morrison. I know he's not here. Alder Marchand.
Yes.
Alder Brackeen.
Yes.
I vote yes as well. And just as a reminder to colleagues, we will be conducting votes by taking the roll just to be procedural, for lack of a better phrase that I can think of right now. It's been a long day. Okay, so the public portion is closed. Alder Marchand.
Mr. Chair, I move the item.
Second.
Now the item has been moved and seconded. Discussion. I see Alder Marchand.
Mr. Chair, I move to substitute the item before us to include the actual ordinance language provided in our packets and the one additional phrase to the resolution.
Second.
So an amendment has been made and seconded. Discussion on the amendment only. Alder Marchand.
Mr. Chair, this is simply good procedural housekeeping to make sure that the item that goes before the full board includes not just the resolution, but also includes the amended ordinance language that would be put into place by the resolution. And it doesn't substantively change the item before us. I urge colleagues to approve the substitute amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Marchand. Any other discussion on the amendment only, which seems fairly straightforward? Seeing Alder Furlow. Go ahead, Alder Furlow.
I concur.
Having concurrence. Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, we will vote. I will call the roll. Alder Furlow.
Yes.
Alder Ferraro Santana.
Yes.
Alder Douglas. Alder Morrison. Alder Marchand.
Yes.
Alder Brackeen,
Yes.
and Alder Decker is yes. Very well. Now, having made that amendment, we're now back to the item as amended with the substituted language. So discussion on the item as amended. Any discussion on the item as amended? Alder Marchand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to raise a couple of issues for discussion. I don't at the moment have a particular amendment to propose, although perhaps one will come to me. The first item I want to discuss is that perhaps it would make sense to give the chief administrative officer who's responsible for certifying the completion of this training, perhaps that city staff person should have the ability to waive one or more of the requirements if circumstances merit that. I'm just thinking about the ride along, for example. We certainly don't want to create physical mobility issues, barriers to service because of physical mobility issues. So that's one thing. The second thing is I feel like the emergency communications bullet ought to be explained a little bit more so that it's clear that it refers to an overview of the functioning of the emergency communications function of a city government or something. Because emergency communications is like there's like zillions of books written about that, I'm sure. So that's my second thought. And then to the question about the 6 months, if we wanted to, I mean, my earlier suggestion about allowing the CAO to waive certain things could apply to that, I suppose. Or you could just make it 12 months, although that seems like a long time. And the other question I have for discussion is, we probably ought to make it clear that it would start upon someone's confirmation of their appointment, or how do we specify what the actual beginning of the appointment is? Because what if it takes, it takes time for the Aldermanic Affairs Committee to do its process and for the board to vote on it. And so is that 6 months from the moment that the appointment's communicated, or is it 6 months upon the confirmation of the appointment? So that's just a question I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I am very much muted. Thank you, Alder Marchand. And I think that those are some good points for discussion. And I see Alder Ferraro Santana with her hand up, so I will recognize
Thank you.
Alder Santana.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I would like to address the issue about the Aldermanic Affairs Committee. Once the letter is sent to the constituent notifying them that they are being appointed by the mayor's request, we have a time limit. That clock starts ticking the time that letter goes out. So we have 60 days at the most. So it is not 6 months for them to do this in a time frame that would be manageable to get a confirmation from someone to certify that they've completed. Until the appointment is done, because it's impossible in a 2-month time frame.
All done, Alder? Take that as a yes. Alder Furlow, I saw your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, this is a little complicated. I don't know, maybe we could, to incorporate this in, maybe we could just add that if the training is not complete, that they will not be eligible for a second term. Perhaps it's going to be a little difficult to set a time for this to be done. Well, I guess that's why we're here, to figure out how to get it done, right? So 6 months. So what would be the penalty? How would it be enforced? perhaps let me retract what I previously said as I'm just thinking this through, because it is the job of this committee to get this done. So what if it was along the lines of, if it's not completed in 6 months, the commissioner would not be able to vote? Just throwing that out there, just a thought to maybe muse around, or something along their privileges on the commission, as a suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Furlow. I'm trying to brew a thought, but I will let Alder Marchand go first because he seems to have one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say that I like the suggestion from Alder Furlow. I know that sometimes you have quorum difficulties with boards and commissions, and I wouldn't want to hold up an appointment per se, but it does create a powerful incentive for an eager commissioner to get that training done if that person is not able to vote anymore until that training is completed. Now that assumes that the motivation, you got to motivate the commissioner, which is sometimes the case. But then there's other cases where you got to motivate the staff to do their thing. So I don't know there's no proposed ramification for the CAO, for example. But I guess the ordinance is more focused on the commissioner and what qualifies a commissioner to perform the duty. But you wouldn't, I think it'd be weird to knock someone out of the seat, given that the ordinance already says when these appointments are made, which they're made in January and February. Now you wouldn't want to suddenly a whole bunch of mid-year appointments where, it's not exactly, is it a vacancy? I mean, so you either have to like create a vacancy, the person's out, and so the vacancy language kicks in terms of who gets appointed or how that appointment happens. Or I guess I wonder if we would need an opinion from like our chief parliamentarian, Mr. Lucas, or from the Corporation Council about our ability to write ordinances that don't create vacancies, don't remove people, but remove their ability to vote. I do like it, but I think I'm wondering if we have that, if the charter would prevent us from writing such an ordinance.
All done, Alder Marchand?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and thank you for that. I mean, my thinking was along the same lines. I also like it. I mean, I know from personal experience that for many of our boards and commissions, unfortunately, meeting quorum each month or each meeting period can sometimes be a nail biter. So I think that would create a powerful incentive. But I too wonder about our power to do it legally. I am not sure. But I saw Alder Ferraro Satuna, so please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We tried to do this once before for City Plan Commission. One of the commissioners was not showing up at the meeting, and the department head and others wished her to continue. And she made only 2 or 3 meetings out of the whole year. To me, that's unacceptable, especially for an important commission. We wanted to give 6 months for her to see if she promised that in 6 months, if she didn't work out, that we would not approve her. And I was told at the time that we couldn't do that. When the appointments are made, they're made for the duration of the time. So if they are appointed at our next board meeting, they're there until their term expires and or they decide to leave that position and a vacancy opens. There's no legal way that we can do that. Unless the mayor amends his letter of appointment before the commission ends, but before their time limit ends, I should say.
Thank you. Further discussion on this point. Does anybody want to hazard another amendment. I'm also wondering if this is something that we might need to get an opinion on and perhaps solve at a future date, either before the second reading or I don't know if people think that this warrants keeping it in committee. I guess I'm just laying out technically what various options I would see. But for now, we're still on the item as amended. Alder Furlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm always very cautious when we are creating legislation. And I never have any issue with holding something in committee through you if that's your desire. I think that when we are writing legislation or rewriting legislation, it should be done with much care and with much deliberation. And so if we do have some questions on how things should move forward or language, because we've gotten some extra amendments that we weren't expecting. And I think it's only fair since the maker has suggested that perhaps these are things that could be incorporated in, that it might be a good idea to take some time and to vet it properly. I'm not making a motion because we're still in discussion. And so yeah, I'm with it.
Thank you, Alder Furlow. I too feel amenable to that, and this does not strike me as the sort of item where we're under some intense external time pressure to, to enact it as soon as we possibly can. Further discussion. Alder Ferraro Santana.
Yes, I would like to do the same. I would like to get firm authority on that before we pass that into law, only because I know that there was an issue before in Aldermanic Affairs and it was not passed. So I don't want to leave ourselves open to scrutiny after the fact.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Furlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess the real question is, can we resolve this between now and the second reading? Or are we holding it in committee for another meeting for further discussion?
Yeah. Well, it seems to me that the question is, are we trying to do something that requires another round of discussion or not? Because if we're trying to solve a problem that we think we actually need to deliberate and discuss some more, then obviously we would need to keep it in committee in order to do that. But if it's just we're trying to fix a problem and either yes we can or no we can't, then either we can or we can't, and that would be, I think, appropriate to send out of the committee. I'm not quite sure what the answer is, though. So, Alder Ferraro Santana.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that I agree with Alder Furlow. I think that I believe that the answer could be had before the first and second reading. So I think that gives us a little time. So I don't think we need to hold it in committee because I think we're just going to rehash the same information. And I think we got a lot of information this evening. So it really is only hinging on one item. So I would like to see it move forward and then see if we can get the information before it goes to the full board for a vote. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't feel, as I said, I feel unsure about what the correct answer is. And so I'm happy to entertain any motion that anyone feels brave enough to make at this point. Alder Ferraro Santana.
I'll be brave enough. Adam usually does it, but he didn't speak this time. I always leave it to him and I was waiting. So I would like to make a motion that we, not table, but we give, approval, with the exception of the training certification, until our second meeting. I believe that we'll get that information.
Alder Marchand.
Point of order, Mr.
Yes,
Chair, we don't need a motion. We already have a motion.
that's true. The motion is on.
So
That's true.
the only motion we would need at this point is either to amend it or to table or to continue or yay, nay at this point. So that's where we're at. I do have an additional comment, but that was my point of order.
Thank you for the point of order. It is well taken. And we can now hear your comment.
That would be fine. I withdraw my motion.
Thank you, Alder Ferraro Santana. I guess I want to move an amendment that would say more about the emergency communications bullet and create a process for the CAO to waive one of the requirements if circumstances merit it.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's been an amendment made and seconded. Discussion on the amendment. Alder Marchand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as I think a little bit further, perhaps I can give a better wording than I just did. So if we look at the actual, and I think we probably want to make it, the wording changes in both the resolution language and in the ordinance amendment language. But just looking at the ordinance amendment language, I'm looking at, E2C11. Currently, the wording is emergency communications. I think maybe a better wording would be an overview of the emergency communications operations of the city of New Haven. And then the other change would be on the paragraph that immediately follows that. It currently says this training shall be coordinated by the training officer, etc. Completion of the training shall be certified by the chief administrative officer and announced at a Board of Police Commissioners meeting. And a certificate of completion shall be provided, etc. I would add a sentence after that that says the chief administrative officer may propose a waiver of any particular training requirement subject to the approval of the Board of Police Commissioners if circumstances merit, period. So that would be just, and I hope Misty's writing this down because I'm, of course this is being recorded, but I just feel like I just thought about the circumstance of someone who's in a wheelchair who can't do a ride along. There may be some other circumstance that would prevent someone from fulfilling one of these requirements and maybe fulfill it within the time frame. And we'd want to give the CAO, who's responsible for certifying its completion, some amount of discretion in waiving it if circumstances merit it. So I think that gives a little bit of wiggle room in a way. And maybe it also helps the time frame question as well. If there's some particular circumstance where someone finished 8 of the 11, but couldn't get to the last 2 because of a death in the family or something, that may help with that as well. So I'm eager to hear what colleagues think of that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Marchand. I think that those amendments. I think the first one provides important clarity, and I think that the second one is prudent because I think that we would certainly want to make sure that whatever accessibility related accommodations are necessary can be made. Further discussion on the amendment. Seeing none, seeing Alder Furlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's a great amendment. It makes sense. Can we go back? Why are we calling it emergency communications and not PSAP in its full title? Does it list it anywhere else in the charter as emergency communications, or is that the proper title for it? I'm searching through and wasn't able to quickly pull it up. Is emergency communications in sync with the rest of the charter, or is it called our public safety, our PSAP?
I am not sure, but perhaps Alder Marchand is. Alder Marchand.
I'm not sure of the answer to that question, but I wonder if PSAP is in the charter at all. It's not a long-standing name for that department. And if we talk about the function rather than the department, maybe that's a way to do it. Like an overview of the emergency communications function, where emergency communications are lowercase letters and not capital case letters, right? Because we just want to make sure that people who come to that commission understand the dispatching process, right? And so if you talk about it in functional terms rather than formal departmental titles, we don't get into the thorny issue of what that department is called under the charter. It may not even exist under the charter, I don't know. But if perhaps we can skirt that issue just by referring to the emergency communications function as it is organized or maintained by the city of New Haven.
Alder Furlow.
I think that would be good so that it doesn't look like it's a city department. I think that's a good cure. Yep, and then of course, as we're going through this, we will certainly do the grammatical changes that are necessary throughout a lot of what's going on in these amendments, things that shouldn't be capitalized. Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and I too think that that's a good change. Further discussion on the amendment. Seeing none, we will vote on the amendment. I will call the roll. Alder Furlow.
Mr. Chair, is it too late to make one other quick comment on this before you call the roll?
Let's say no, it's not too late.
Just received from staff, it is called public safety communications in the budget. And so just so that we can have that, perhaps, I'm not suggesting a change, but so that we know it is called public safety communications in our budget. And I defer to you for going back to the roll, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification as well. I think that probably the way we were talking before, referring to the function and applying that to other points as well, probably gets around that, but it is helpful to know what it's called elsewhere in official documents. So thank you. But I will now I will call the roll on this amendment that Alder Marchand has put forward. Alder Furlow.
Yes.
Alder Ferraro Santana.
Yes,
Alder Douglas. Alder Morrison. Alder Marchand.
Yes.
Alder Brackeen.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Now we are back again to the item as amended. Any further discussion on the item as amended? Alder Marchand.
I'm going to propose an additional amendment for the purposes of discussion, which is to add another required training related to confidentiality and ethics.
Do I hear a second?
Second,
The amendment has been made and has been seconded. Discussion on the amendment. Alder Marchand.
And yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh, I beg your pardon. My computer is right next to my phone.
Let's say it's the amendment, please.
Yes. I think perhaps better wording would be an overview of the confidentiality policies and the ethics, policy for the city of New Haven, or words to that effect. And I think, it may very well be the case that that already happens, but I think it's good policy, and the public, I think, would feel encouraged that we put it in. And I don't think it's contrary at all to the spirit or the intention of the makers, but perhaps just an additional clarification or making more explicit something that perhaps was assumed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Marchand. Further discussion on the amendment. Alder Furlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are we creating another number? And if my colleague could just say that one more time, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Alder Furlow. Please, Alder Marchand.
I'd be glad to. Thank you, gentlemen. As the prior amendment, we would want to amend the resolution where the listed items are lettered. So this would be, in the resolution, it'd be letter L. But in the draft ordinance language, it's in Roman, very small Roman numerals, where it would be XII.
Does that answer your question, Alder Furlow?
And the actual wording of the amendment?
Alder Marchand.
An overview of the confidentiality and ethics policies of the city of New Haven. Maybe this would be better. An overview of the confidentiality and ethics policy governing the conduct of city staff and appointees.
Alder Furlow, do you have further questions, or does that answer what you're driving after?
It does answer, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, we will vote on it. I will call the roll. Alder Furlow.
Yes.
Alder Ferrara Santana.
yes,
Alder Douglas. Alder Morrison. Alder Marchand.
Yes.
Alder Brackeen.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. We've landed back at our item as amended. Further discussion. Alder Marchand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel comfortable voting on this tonight, knowing that our intrepid chair and his dutiful vice chair will work hard with city staff to explore the question of enforceability and what has been done before in other circumstances where someone did not meet a qualification after the appointment was finalized. And I look forward to hearing back what the answer to those questions are. But as it stands now, I congratulate the work of Alder Antunes and the fellow alders who were makers of this legislation. And I'm eager to vote yes on it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Marchand. Further discussion on our item as amended. Alder Furlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we're ready. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the item as amended before we send it up for a vote? Well, I will just add quickly myself that, I think that there's a robust discussion in our city and our state and our country about policing right now. I think that everybody agrees that training in general is part of the puzzle here. We of course here are talking about not the training of the police, but training of a very important body in our city, the important police commission. And I think that the strength of that commission is, that it is a group of civilians, but I think that the best training that we can provide them so that they can execute their very important job, it is prudent for us to enforce that and enact that. And so as my colleague Alderman Marchand said, the vice chair of this committee and myself will work with staff to try to see get us as far as we can on this question of enforceability. But for now, I too would be happy to send it favorably. Any last discussion, or shall we vote?
Let's go.
Let's vote. Okay, I will call the roll. Alder Furlow.
Yes.
Alder Farrar Santana.
Yes,
Alder Douglas. Alder Morrison. Alder Marchand.
Yes.
Alder Brackeen.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So we have moved that item forward favorably. Are there any motions that anybody would like to make? I can think of a few.
I'm waiting for you, Adam. No.
It's Alder Furlow's hand.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
Motion has been made, has been seconded. I'm going to really drag out the vote of it now. Alder Furlow.
Yes.
Alder Farrar Santana.
Yes,
Alder Douglas. Alder Morrison. Alder Marchand.
Yes.
Alder Brackeen.
Yes.
I vote yes. We are adjourned. Have a lovely evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
bye.
Good work, everybody.